Hello and welcome to the Roundtable podcast. My name is Shogun, and this is our third annual 9/11 event, even though the server is only 2 years old, by which I mean we've done it twice annually and had a third 9/11 event that just spontaneously happened one day. But it's a tradition to do it every day. Not every day, every year on this day, which is, of course, historic and tragic. So before we get started, make sure you've joined the Roundtable Discord server on YouTube and BitChute. Check out our podcasts, of which there are many. Check out our channels, of which there are four, all with different episodes and lots of great episodes. That being said, welcome everybody to the second annual 9/11 event. So we wanted to make this, Rafi made a nice poster and he said, in memoriam, united we stand, which was kind of the vibe I wanted to go with as well. We can definitely talk about the conspiracy theories, and we will. But I think it's good to remember the victims because whoever the fuck did this, a lot of people died horrible deaths and terrifying deaths. And a lot of people were very traumatized. And then the whole world got radically changed abruptly. And I remember this because I was like, I don't know how old, teenager, I guess, somewhere between 14 and 18, I guess. And maybe I was in my undergrad actually, so I must have been a bit older. But anyways, I was writing my thesis about the global war on terror. So the point is, because this was the biggest political event of my lifetime, and it was obvious that the beginning of the global war on terror and the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, which were kind of bizarrely justified not by 9/11. So they just immediately launched these two Middle Eastern wars after this terrorist attack, but later none of that made any sense in terms of a response to 9/11. That was all some kind of weird boondoggle. But the point is, it was such a significant thing. I wrote my thesis about it, my first thesis, and I don't really remember much about that. It was paper bound. But the point is, our whole world is still different, and the Afghanistan war just ended. So I guess one way to look at this annual 9/11 event is it's also the quote-unquote end of the Afghanistan war, in the sense that the U.S. finally withdrew after 20 years. So 20 years later, 20 years of war later, Taliban now control Afghanistan again. So it's a very strange and dark story with a lot of fucking horrible angles. And it's hard to say which is the worst way to look at it in terms of which is most disturbing, because all the possibilities are disturbing. But that being said, does anyone want to give a take on 9/11? What they think happened, who they think was responsible, or anything at all? If not, and if no one else wants to say anything, it's an open discussion event rather than a usual interview or whatever. I can also just continue to talk, but I promise I won't go on too long. This will be probably a short one this year.
I'll bring something up.
Yeah. So anyways, go ahead, please.
So, I saw two things that were interesting today. One was since Reddit was kind of all about 9/11 stuff today, I saw some stuff this morning. And one of them was a blacksmith who took a structural steel beam and showed how much strength it had and how it could lift an anvil, being bent with it. And then he put it into a furnace. He put a similar steel beam into a furnace, 300 or 400 degrees below its melting point. He took it out, smashed it on the anvil, showed that it wasn't melted, put it into a little hole in the anvil, and bent it with his pinky finger completely over, showing that much below the melting temperature, steel beams lose crazy structural integrity. Mm-hmm. And so I watched that and I'm like, wow, that's legit. That's some real shit. And then I immediately go and watch another video, which was the first 20 minutes or 40 minutes live footage from news sources and ground cameras and stuff of 9/11 happening. And watching the actual live terror and the stuff that was going on in the crowds and stuff, as it was live happening, was honestly terrifying. And when they told people whenever they found that people were jumping, that first reports of people seeing the first person jump and then other people jump, that was just bone chilling to hear. And people being this is probably a terrorist attack, potentially this, potentially that, and some of the stuff we still say today and some of the stuff we don't. But it was very interesting to see that first reaction, because you hear people I was very young, I was one whenever 9/11 happened, right? So seeing that was kind of gave me that same perspective of like what might have happened if I was like in school when 9/11 happened, which kind of like humbled me. And then that's sort of what inspired me to make the poster for today's event kind of like more memorialized, because I was like, it is serious. And even any way you want to take it, you know, people did die. And like, you know, but yeah, that's all I want to say.
So just to be clear, what was the significant? Just I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand you. So the first video you watched about the structural integrity of beams was proving that steel beams would not melt and therefore would not have collapsed. Is that what it was saying, or was it
No,
saying
it was proving that they very easily bend 400 degrees below their melting point and only 100 or 200 degrees above the flame point of steel of jet fuel. So it was saying that jet fuel would be very capable, and the fire in the building would be very capable of ruining the structural integrity. So that was the
Yeah,
point.
I mean, maybe so, but even if that were true, and again, I'm no engineer, mathematician, or anything by any means. The plane is very small, as you remember when it's hitting the building, like the size of the plane and the amount of fuel. Although it's a big plane, compared to that building, it's very small. So it's not like, but the buildings just kind of collapsed like really quickly all at once, right? Like if people use the term free fall speed, whether that's correct or not, they fall like they just collapse into their footprint and the whole buildings just like disappear. So the idea that this little impact at the top of a building and then this fire, even if it was hot enough to melt the beams in the fire, I still don't understand how the buildings like vaporized sort of into their footprint the way that they appear to have done. And again, I still have, after all the conversations we've had and all the research I've done and all the people that have talked about it, I still don't know what really happened that day. I just know all the different theories. But it's still, my mind just cannot fathom when I watch those planes at the top of those huge buildings that were designed to withstand multiple impacts of airplanes, that I can't understand how they fell. And of course, it also doesn't solve the problem. Building 7, which of course also collapsed on that day, although it was not hit by any planes. And of course, the Fox News reporter, or whatever, reported that the building had gone down before it had gone down. So those are all still things that I don't know any explanation for.
Well,
And yeah, many other conspiracies, and I don't know how deep we need to go into it this year, in the sense that we've done it all and recorded other episodes about it, which I'll post on the general chat. But if anyone else has theories about it, including that it was airplanes and that's all, or whatever, who did it, how it was done, why it was done.
Well, I do think it was there is sufficient evidence that I have read that like the buildings were emptied a few days prior and it could have potentially been a planned demolition and like that. But I still I mean, the plane still hit. That was basically my point originally, is that it's still a tragedy, regardless that it was a terrorism attack, regardless if it was planned or whatever. It's still a tragedy. That was sort of my point. But I do still think that it was like taken, like I think the building definitely wouldn't have gone down the way it would have if it wouldn't have gone down as pretty or at all. So they probably spiced it up with some planned demo shit at the bottom, because it does just go down, like it like blew up, obviously. Like that's pretty hard to dispute, right?
It just, yeah, I mean, I'm not in the field where I can make a mathematical case, but my mind just doesn't understand a huge building just sort of disappearing all at once because a plane hit the top of it and it was on fire. It doesn't add up. And there also, people raise the point of like, why wasn't there like, because those buildings, however tall they were, right? Say they were like 100 stories tall. If they collapsed, shouldn't there have been, no matter what, like a huge pile of rubbish, like just wreckage and dust and whatever, like at least several stories high? Even if the whole building burned to the ground, there'd be a bunch of slag and melted material and safes and sinks and fucking toilets. But all the material just kind of disappears and turns into dust. And then a ton of people got cancer because the buildings themselves kind of vaporized into the air and people were breathing in like God knows what. So I don't know.
Yeah, asbestos. I remember hearing a story about somebody who watched they were watching 9/11 live as it happened on the news, and their grandfather or their dad was a scientist or a doctor, and the first thing they said when they saw like all the smoke going out even before the buildings fell, I think he was like, that is going to have massive implications for the rest of the people like living in this area forever. Like they are going to be like riddled with cancer because that building is not up to any codes like that are like at all needed to not get like massive asbestos poisoning, and spreading all of that throughout the society is like a massive thing. So I mean, like, that is also like insanely terrifying. If you want to think of it as like like as a terrorism attack, it's also a bioterrorism attack in that sense, since it's giving people so much long-term damage after, even not intentionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very sad. And, all the, of course, first responders and firefighters and people who were in the buildings, when they went down. But you said something in the last turn where you said there was evidence that they had emptied the buildings a few days before. But you mean of people or of what? Like, emptied it of what?
There was evidence that everybody in the building was like evacuated, like it was cleared out of people, and a team of like people went in with like briefcases or whatever. Like a bunch of people went into the building when it was empty, and nobody really knows what they did, and then they went out of the building, and then the next day it was open again. And then I need to confirm that. I mean, I need that as a personal source in my life to know if that's a fact or not, because I can probably confirm that. But if that's true, then that would lend great credence to the fact, to the theory that it's planned demolition, because then that would be the time that they obviously put up the demo and like set the charges and shit, or at least did the end result in the final like play, so that when the plane hit, it was set to like go down. I'm just gonna take a rip.
So when you said that it was emptied out of people, you mean it was emptied out of people, and then while it was emptied out of people, you think people went in and planted explosives or something, but you do agree there was people in the building when they went down. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, interesting.
That's just something I've heard, and I've heard it from different sources, and I need to do personal research into it to actually see if it's legitimate or not, because it 100% can be confirmed or denied.
Yes. And so again, I just posted in general chat one of our previous episodes. So if you want a more detailed breakdown of this issue, you might want to listen to that. I think we're going to keep it a little bit shorter and later today. But that's a good episode, and a lot of people give a lot of information in that episode. And I don't think it's the only one that we have, but it's the only one I've found so far. But anyways, people talk about a lot of different stuff. They talk about using it as a false flag to potentially trigger or justify the wars that followed, or they say no, they just took advantage of what happened in order to launch the wars, but they didn't do it for that reason. There's also something about a bunch of gold that was disappeared out of like one of the buildings. I've heard multiple buildings went down that day, not even just 3. I've heard that, of course, there's a lot of speculation about where I've heard a lot of people say Osama bin Laden wasn't even in Afghanistan, or he was already in a hospital, or he's already in dialysis. Like, it's a different person. I mean, there's just so many conspiracy theories, and we've talked about them before. And honestly, I'm still not really any closer to knowing what exactly happened. My biggest, confusion about the issue has always been my understanding of the way that American airspace is controlled, in particular against aerial threats, and my understanding of how fighter jets are capable of scramble to intercept planes that go off their assigned flight paths, which all of these commercial airliners did. So using multiple lines of intelligence, they would have been able to detect this, and they would have had huge amounts of time to scramble those fighter jets. And those fighter jets, allegedly, one of them crashed into the Pentagon. So if you want my personal biggest problem with this whole story, it's this aspect of it. It doesn't make any sense. There's no way under heaven or earth you could fly a commercial 747 into the Pentagon unless it was allowed to happen. You don't think they ever considered that the Pentagon might be attacked by a plane? They didn't have anything in place for that. The Pentagon of the greatest military, the greatest air force the world has ever known, with the greatest air security system and missile defense system and every kind of military thing you could ever imagine, was not able to intercept a slow-moving plane with a fucking transponder on it, moving off its assigned flight course for some number of hours, and they didn't scramble fighter jets to stop it from hitting the Pentagon? What are we talking about? That makes no fucking sense. They could shoot it down 100 different ways. And they would, because that's the most significant strategic site in the United States, which makes it the most strategic military site in the world, which means it's protected from aerial threats. Like Russia has planes, China has planes, so you're not going to allow any plane or missile to hit the goddamn Pentagon unless it's allowed to happen. It doesn't make any sense. NSA, give us the truth, bro. What's up with 9/11? If you want.
It's like really it's. I don't think anybody wants to hear about my thoughts on 9/11.
All right, buddy. I asked you because I did, but if you don't want to tell us, that's fine.
Aw.
I think we probably have your take on it in previous episodes. And you can weigh in at any time if you decide.
No, it's like a terrible thing that should have never happened. And the dancing Israelis and all this shit going on, it's terrible.
It is absolutely terrible, and as we said, this year it's a memorial episode, in memory of the victims, since we don't know who the perpetrators necessarily are, and whatever. So that's sort of the thing.
Yeah, but like 3,000 people died, dude. Like you can't just like consider this a joke or a story or something to talk about. Like this
You just came drunk in, and we literally just laid out that this is all a memorial in memory of the victims and how sad it was. So, get off your high horse, and it is something to talk about. And then no, it's not. So anyway, if people don't talk about huge historic tragedies, and nobody said it was a joke, I asked you to tell us your take on it.
Well, so 9/11 was the biggest profit story for things like the NSA, like the NSA and the CIA. Like they got pushed, they order out of chaos. Like it was just like obscene. Like, but it was real. Like, so this like clash of an event that changed the world, right? Like, so it sucks. It sucks. I don't want to think about it.
Well, I agree completely. I think can you close your mic? I think not thinking that it's a tragedy is obviously a complete overlook of the obvious facts of the situation. The most important thing of the entire situation is the 3,000 people who died, the people who jumped, the people who didn't have to lose their lives, the people who got cancer from the asbestos. All of that is obviously the most important aspect of any of this, and any thought about it being a false flag or anything has to be done under the precept that we all assume the people who lost their lives were it happened tragically and for no reason, no good reason. And from that point on, we get to speculate, right? So then, the obvious question is, if it was done governmentally for a reason, then what is that reason, and why is that reason worth it in their eyes? And what would that reason even be? I don't even understand it. I've heard it basically jokingly referenced what the reason is, but it always just seems to me like that wouldn't even make sense. Like it would have to be done under such evil guise that it's a tragedy no matter what.
Well, yeah, of course it's a tragedy. The people who died were not combatants or soldiers of any kind, right? They were literally civilians. So anyone who doesn't think it's a tragedy is, pretty nuts. And nobody doesn't think it was a tragedy. It's a huge tragedy. That's why it's so important to figure out what happened, because the only thing that you can do after such a tragedy, or after murder, or after mass murder, is seek some kind of justice. But you can't have any kind of justice or any kind of closure if you don't actually know the truth of what happened, right? If someone kills your wife or your whole family, God forbid, you're going to need to at least know the truth of what happened if you're going to want to figure out how to have justice and who should be punished and how you can make sure it doesn't happen again, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's important to think about it, unless you just think the mainstream story is true. So let's go over that. What even is the mainstream story? Well, 12 hijackers trained in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, I don't remember, flew 3 civilian aircraft full of people, 2 of them into the World Trade Center, 1 of them into the Pentagon. And this was caused by Osama bin Laden, who was only found like however many years later, killed, and then a whole Black Hawk helicopter full of the people who killed him crashed and they all died. So this is like pretty hard to believe on many different levels, but maybe there's some element of truth to it.
Well, I assume it would be an abridged version of the actual story. You wouldn't have to change around the fact that Osama bin Laden did it if you killed him immediately before he could do any like further damage and let that out, right? So I would have no reason to understand that they would have to like completely alter the narrative of the entire thing. But
right.
I mean, it would be interesting nowadays. You couldn't even pull that 9/11 off nowadays in the same way, like as a conspiracy, from a conspiracy perspective, because like you would be filmed on the plane and live streamed on TikTok immediately, right? Like you would know what the faces of these people, they would ask them questions. It would be all this information. It would be like facial tracking back to like other countries, like where like they're from and like what's going on there and what their connections are. Like it couldn't even be done nowadays. And if God forbid like a similar tragedy happens as like a false flag, I don't even know how tragic it would have to be in this modern day and age. I mean, I guess then like the COVID conspiracy would say COVID, but I don't even think that like was tragic enough. If you're wanting to recreate 9/11 and what that brought people together as. Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, like I don't even understand how to think about this. Like, so the other part of it is that on the day that 9/11 occurred, the story is that the airspace people didn't respond properly because a huge drill simulating the exact scenario that actually played out was scheduled for that same time and day. So when this was happening, they thought it wasn't real because they thought it was a drill, but then it was real. That's like the official story or something, which doesn't make any sense on so many different levels.
What is the narrative? That it was a drill? That the planes flying through the city like that was a drill?
That there was a drill scheduled, like unless I'm mistaken about this, that there was a drill scheduled on the same day. And so when like that, because I said like, well, why didn't they scramble fighter jets? And part of the story is like, well, because there was a drill for the same event on the same day, so they thought it was the drill, which still doesn't make any sense. You have physical sonar, I don't know, like it's so baffling to me, and it defies to me logic that the mainstream explanation could be even close to the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It either has to have like huge additional elements to it that we're not being told, or be completely a lie, or have only some elements of the truth. I don't know, but
like Shogun, I'll back you up on your point here, because like on that video I was watching of like the actual like first hour of 9/11, all on the live streams, right? The newscasters in about 45 seconds to a minute and a half got on the phone with somebody in the World Trade Center. They got on the phone with like their Wall Street people who had a firm, and they were like, they've been ordered to evacuate. They're not being given much information. There is a fire on the top floor. They had that information in under 2 minutes. They had somebody on the phone. The military 1000% knew that those planes were there, and they had ample people calling them on the job being like, hey, chief, did you know this plane is coming? And they probably got the response, oh shit, we'll look into that. Like there was millions of, probably like at least thousands of people who contacted military moments before that happened, within ample time to get a plane in the air. There was already planes in the air. Like how fast can a fighter jet get from a state to another state? Like 10 minutes?
This is the point I want to get to. Like the Pentagon is defended. So first of all, would the U.S. government be willing to shoot down a civilian airliner full of people, Americans, if it was going to crash into the Pentagon? Yes, of course they would. Of course they would. That would be the thing that you would do, I think, because those people are going to die anyway, first of all, and secondarily, if you don't stop them, that's obviously worse, right? God knows what's in that building, but obviously it's very important, not supposed to be blown up by a plane, right? And so the point is, those fighter jets, like if I've studied fighter jet technology and so forth quite a lot, and it's not even close to the only system they have for airspace control. So again, first of all, they wouldn't even need any of the airspace control equipment in terms of sonar and radar and so forth, because these civilian planes are directly connected to the fucking air control centers. They have transponders in them, right? So they're constantly broadcasting their exact location in real time. So there's no question they would detect this even without all their systems. The point is, those systems of defense they have are designed to defend them against the Russians and the Chinese and stuff like that, who have fifth generation fighter jets that move insanely fast, like infinitely faster than those F-57 or the Boeing planes or whatever. So yeah, time would not have been an issue, detection would not have been an issue, and like ethics would not have been an issue. So why were those planes not shot down? And then again, the narrative that is said is that there was some accounting error with like $1 trillion missing from the U.S. military budget, and that whole accounting wing of the Pentagon was destroyed by this crash. So it was maybe to destroy a bunch of evidence of financial irregularities or something. But it still doesn't make sense, and yeah, unless that's the explanation. Which again, I don't know. Please don't assassinate me, military. I mean, I'm just repeating like 100,000 times fucking repeated conspiracies at this point, right? As just what I've heard. I don't claim to know the truth at this point, but it just seems like a lot of buildings went down, a lot of things happened that could have been prevented. A drill happening at the same day doesn't make any sense. Launching two Middle Eastern wars doesn't make any sense based on a terrorist attack, because again, terrorists are not state actors and so forth anyway. So I don't know. Those are just some of my issues with the official story: missing rubble, near free fall speeds, et cetera, et cetera. And I've heard all the arguments on both sides, and I don't really understand either side. So I don't know the truth. But some people say there weren't even planes, or the planes were holograms. They were missiles, not planes, and then it was edited in, and like. What is terrifying about it is it shows the scale of conspiracy that can be carried out. Because make no mistake, no matter what this was, it was a conspiracy either way. So just take one lesson away, maybe from 9/11. I would suggest, like when people use the term, that's a conspiracy, man. Like as though it's not real. Conspiracy means a plan made by people in secret. That's what it means, and it may also specifically mean a criminal plan made by people in secret. But regardless of which of those definitions you use, it does not mean something far-fetched, unreal, or untrue. It means a plan made in secret. So just understand that's what a conspiracy is, and a theory is the only way you can approach an understanding of something like that. So conspiracy theory is similar to intelligence analysis in the sense that you're trying to figure out what people are doing that are not telling you the truth about what they're doing. And even if this was just done by the 9/11 hijackers, and they were working for the Taliban, and that was under Osama bin Laden, that would have been a theory initially, and God only knows, it's just too much information for my mind. So if you want to hear more about it, first of all, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? If not, I think, again, it would be kind of redundant for me to go over all these conspiracy theories again, because we've already done that in previous episodes. So I don't really have anything to add. I wanted to keep up the tradition, though, of the yearly memorial event. So, God rest the souls of the victims. I hope someday the truth comes out in full and that justice is done in whatever way that makes sense. And thank you all for attending. And thank you, Rafi, for your contributions and for recording. We will simply close this edition of the podcast there and return to freestyle chat. However, please make sure that you have joined the Roundtable Discord server, follow, subscribe to all our YouTube and BitChute channels, which are 4, and watch our over 300 or whatever great podcast episodes. Thank you very much, and God bless.
God bless.